Yeah.
But as far as like the Vatican and their telescope, like, I mean, what do you think that the Vatican's lying about with their telescope?
Well, I think the whole conception of the Earth, us being a spinning ball in this infinite vacuum of space, and that we can blast people off into far distant planets. All of that is kind of
But we haven't done that.
well,
We
right.
haven't sent anybody to planets.
No, but they claim that it's possible. Oh, rovers to Mars, as an example,
Right.
as a precursor to that idea. You know,
You could see
NASA.
Mars with a backyard telescope. Like, if you can see it, they could shoot something out up there. You don't think so?
Well, that's a
You don't think they
that's an
can shoot
interesting
something up on the
point.
moon?
So the telescopes that most people can access, including the so-called telescopic imagery, uses a magnification technique that artificially refracts away the light and sort of sphericizes or renders the lights that are being gazed upon as looking more solid than they actually are. You can compare this phenomena between like a 100x telescope versus like a 1000x plus digital zoom, and though that there's a very different phenomena that is being intermediated there through the machine itself, or through the instrument itself. And so that is another basis for a lot of this cosmological subversion. Is if you go back to the philosophies of Democritus, you see the creation of atomism as the notion that everything is reducible to atom or void, right? And that was heavily repudiated by Socrates, of course, and Plato didn't like that either. So there's always been sort of an ongoing debate as to the epistemological.
People have known about these planets going back, since long before Judaism. And the ancients we can see most planets with the naked eye, like Aquarian TV says. And we can see the moon, how it's a circle in a sphere. We can see the eclipses. We can see that no matter what eclipse, when the sun is shining on the earth, you can see that it's a curve from every different angle. So,
Well,
what do you think explains that?
well, okay, so that particular description, the ancients did. They were able to they had sophisticated ways of calculating the movements of the heavens, but they did not, in those calculations, surmise that the surface area upon which the phenomena were being observed was based upon a curved orientation. So, in other words, we've seen this manipulation of our reality principle happen incrementally, to where we're basically kind of being gaslit into denying our own experience, and instead imbibing or accepting these sort of mystical authoritarian proclamations about the lights in the heavens. And it actually goes back to Hipparchus, who was the founder of trigonometry, and he had many important discoveries. However, when it came to the topic of the luminaries, or the lights in the sky, he presumed, again, no real investigation into this, because it really can't be experientially proved, that he said, for all intents and purposes, the lights in the heavens are infinitely far away. And this is a foundational presumption that did indeed influence a lot of the subsequent attempts to declare the Earth or the lights in the heavens to be spheres. And that's actually a mystery school invention as well. The Samothracian Kabiri, the initiates in that order saw themselves as demigods, and they used an initiation ritual that sought to characterize all of the lights in the sky as other spheres that were dominated by higher demigods. And so the point of the mystery ritual was to make them believe that they themselves, through their initiation, were becoming demigods over the goddess Gaia. And so Gaia was essentially turned into one of these orbs, which is really the realm upon which we experience reality. And that in itself became an egregore or a thought form that was continually referenced over and over again as the basis for phenomenological observation. And so I see it as an example of, again, a sort of mystical authoritarianism where we can't actually verify or forensically measure any of these gazings upon that which we don't have any real dominion over, that which is that is informing things.
Hold on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I asked, just a few years ago, I was able to go outside and look at the moon and see that the curve of the Earth, the shadow with the sun shining on the Earth, was a curve. And it looked like a big sphere. And that's how it happens every single time, no matter where they're lined up, showing that it's not a disc that's a circle, it's a sphere that's a circle.
Well,
so my eyes aren't lying to me when I use the little thing to protect your eyes and look up at it.
Adam, I would say the same thing. My eyes don't lie to me, and there's a video I posted on our official Telegram where it was like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm looking at the sun in the sky, and I can also see the moon juxtaposed with the sun. So if they're juxtaposed with one another, how could the Earth possibly be casting a shadow? So we have to consider the a possibility that the moon phases as we see them. The shadow is one potential explanation, but what if the moon itself is casting its own light and has its own phase that isn't necessarily governed by a shadow?
I can look up at the moon during the daytime or at night, and you can see the side that's being lit, and you can still see the outline of the back half, the dark side that's not lit. You can see the whole thing. They don't have just half of the light on.
I know, that's what I'm saying, though, is if this
mechanism would be able to plant a sun or plant a moon that high in the air and fuel it and sustain it. Like, I'm kind of confused here, because it's usually Bible believers that are promoting the flat Earth and
unfortunately
firmament type of dome ideas.
Unfortunately, so.
Like, it's a conspiracy hiding the Creator God and convincing us, like a huge conspiracy that the Earth, like, you say that we're not on a planet flying through space. How do you explain asteroids that crash in that we can see, or comets that they've measured have hit before?
Well, where's the remains
space
of
dust crashing into us?
Well, again, I think that we're sort of getting a little bit sidetracked on the broader discussion, but
I'm having Owen Benjamin on tomorrow, who is into this stuff. So I expected this tomorrow, but I didn't think it was going to turn that way today. But I guess, I don't know, I'll consider practice for the big bear.
Well, sure. I've never really gotten deep into flat Earth. Okay. So that's
the judeo threat.
That's an important admission. I'm basically offering up the very real.
I haven't studied it. I've studied it some, but I just don't usually, spend my time talking about it.
Sure, and our offering really here is to demonstrate that in much the same way that you've discovered a lot of these theological subversions over people's imagination as to what God is or what the Creator is, that there is very much so a scientific and epistemological form of subversion that seeks to implant, again at a very early age, the power of suggestion through almost hypnotic relay, that this is the only explanation for real world phenomena, including the lights in the skies that we perceive. So the thing that's interesting about the moon is you could designate it as a diotic plasma that actually has a phase that we simply, in our frame of reference for time, don't see the rapidity with which it's actually occurring. We're beings that, traditionally speaking, can only have a predominant sense through the eye, and so there is an argument to be had that if you superimpose a framework that guides your perceptions about reality, then your perceptions are going to necessarily conform to that frame of reference. And so that's being had in the sciences when it comes to astrophysics, when it comes to the biological sciences, when it comes to many of the things that we deem to be hard science, are very much informed by these same kind of power suggestion, hypnotic trance illusions and appeals to authoritarianism.
You're saying that everybody's under a hypnotic trance when we look at the moon?
No, I'm saying that the frame of reference that we're applying to that perception is a subverted frame of reference.
This reminds me of like Greek Orthodox Christian pill pull a little bit, to be honest. I feel like the fact that so many millions and hundreds of millions in America believe that Jews are chosen by God and that they believe that they're saved from hell because of a blood magic ritual, I feel like is much more of a substantial thing that we can focus on and prove. And that's honestly, I think the flat earth stuff is just nothing but a distraction that discredits. I almost, and I'm not saying you guys are like, promoting this as agents or anything. I think a lot of people sincerely believe this, but in my mind, it's just kind of seems like a distraction. I'll just leave it there.
Well, the problem with that is that it can't have been a distraction because this has been an ongoing debate for a really, really long time. It really goes back to days before Socrates, and again, the Hipparchus assumption that the lights in the sky are essentially infinitely far away, and there's no way to prove that presumption. Yet it's been unchecked, and it's been allowed to build a mass misconception about the very reality in which we live. So I think really the argument I'm trying to bring forth is that there are so many mass misconceptions that there really isn't a whole lot of safe territory when it comes to the extent to which we've been given a kind of false cosmology or a false understanding of things, and that is, of course, pertains to the theological question, but I think it also pertains to much more on the ground sort of physical phenomena as well. And I just to answer the assertion that it's sort of Greek Orthodox pill pull. I don't know. I don't think that's a terribly fair characterization because I'm very critical of the various schizophrenia and the schisms that are part and parcel to religious histories, especially within Abrahamism and all the different schisms that are involved there. So, from a philosophical point of view, I think it is important to suspend one's disbelief in the assertion that perhaps there are more mass misconceptions that operate in a perhaps subconscious or unconscious fashion due to inculcation from an early age where we uncritically accept things that this very much could be this very much could pertain to the sciences themselves. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring up the influence of Kabbalah on science, because it shows that many of the premises of science can be philosophically hijacked, and that many of the so-called discoveries can have deceptive frames of reference.
I definitely agree to that.
Yeah. And so, that's all I'm basically indicating is that the more you go down this.
But hold on, real quick. What they were like connecting very theoretical things to Kabbalah, like, you know, I can look up. I saw Halley's Comet, right, or Hale-Bopp. I could see that with a telescope. So like, I know, I can see all the stars in the sky, and I don't think, you know, that's my lying eyes. I think those are very distant, you know, reacting stars like the sun that we have. I mean, what do you think? How do you explain it all? I mean, isn't that amazing and a miracle and crazy enough as it is? Like, why is it? You said, oh, it's like you think they're lying about how far away the other planets are. Like, why would? What do they gain by this lie? Who is behind
this is
lie?
It's a very good question.
This whole thing.
Okay, it's gained. There's an incentive to convince people of their lack of significance through evolutionary accident. There's an incentive to hide resources or discoverable lands that would allow for more population. There's an incentive to essentially create a new authoritarian class of scientific interpreters that operates like a priest class over the understanding of subjects that they actually don't have any real forensic knowledge about either, but they're LARPing as though they do. And so it creates a huge economic boondoggle as well to provide money laundering troughs towards these pseudoscientific aims, and that acts as a form of economic subversion on top of a cosmological subversion. So I think there's plenty of incentives.
So I wanted to ask you, talk about like more land or extra resources. Do you think that there's just like other realms, other places like over the ice wall?
Well, okay, so the Antarctic Treaty, for example, is the longest standing, uninterrupted, uncontested, zero issues have been made about that agreement.
We can disagree on a lot, but we can all agree you can't explore beyond Antarctica.
Right. And that there is a gate-kept, highly, very well-funded attempt to essentially gatekeep any further exploration on the so-called continent, which I believe if you look at the Hammond's air map, which was the actual air map used in World War II, that directed all of these fighter planes all over the place and these bombers, that they were not using any kind of spherical coordinate basis for those flights. They were using the Euclidean flat stationary map to guide all these expeditions. And if you look at Admiral Richard Byrd, all of those military forays into the Antarctic, much of it is shrouded in mystery.
I've heard this stuff before. So your answer basically is you do think there's something beyond the ice wall. Other land that there's.
Well, let me make it a little simpler. Forget about, you know, the shape of the Earth for a moment.
Right.
Try to buy a drone that can fly 10 miles. You can find them. You can buy them. But like the government actually governs who can fly and who can't. You know, they literally draw an airspace through the FAA, and if your drone is in that airspace, it'll turn off. You know, and the same is true for commercial flights. So they do have this top-down technocratic control, and why wouldn't they censor? You know, forget about Antarctica for a minute.
Right.
They're probably censoring land that we do know about and could potentially explore because they have some sort of national security interest, or, you know, UN World Heritage Site.
Right.
Who knows what they've sequestered? I mean, censorship is not relegated to the internet. It's history. It's cartographic.
I mean, because, like I said, you can see the eclipses on the moon, the curve of the Earth.
Well, yeah, but the Mayans were able to predict eclipses long before there was any so-called forensic calendared measurement. I mean, in other words, a lot of the stuff that we use as data to verify the heliocentric worldview was already in existence with cultures and cosmologies that had no such purview about these particular phenomena. So it's easy to actually calculate eclipse cycles. You don't need those. You don't need the phenomena to accord to an enlarged atomistic projection of the universe. I mean, that's essentially what astrophysics is it's an enlargement and a superimposed projection of atomistic presumptions and axioms. And in the same way that we look under the microscope, right, there's another intermediation of our perception to the phenomena in question. So there's a lot of room for distortion and deception within that realm too. The whole really macro-micro bifurcation is one of the kind of schizophrenic epistemological problems that we face going forward. And it's replicated in ideas pertaining to subject and object. It portends to the notion of soul and mind and body. All these different schisms, I think, go back to a fundamental separatistic belief in the composition of the human being within the world. And I think that the world in which we reside is much more complex and nuanced than we would like to allege with the current scientific models that we're using today. So that being said, I think that looking at some of these clips that I forwarded to you might at least open more inquiry into this subject as to how gerrymandered and easily manipulated so-called scientific understandings and frames of references around reality actually are. So, do you have this actually clip right here?
Yep, it's queued up.
All right, yeah, go ahead and play this. So, because this answers your question about, yeah, astrophysics, it is very theoretical, but the ability to subvert so-called hard sciences is kind of laid bare in a couple different clips here that I've got queued up.
Science is Wissenschaft. And you heard its Yiddish cognate, Wissenschaft, earlier today in Tony Michaels' lecture. But Wissenschaft, or science, has always had a more expansive meaning in German, and in the German context, than the Anglo-American conception of science. German science is not restricted to the study of nature or humanity's interaction with the natural world. In German, science can also refer to philosophy, for example, including metaphysics and epistemology, so studies of what is reality, and also how do we know that reality. That's epistemology, the study of the philosophical study of knowledge. Science also encompasses the field of knowledge that we call the humanities, and usually kind of pit as the pair or the opposite of science versus the humanities. So in the German context, Wissenschaft encompasses both, or can encompass both. So let's say a little bit more specifically then, if that's true, does this term in German have any meaning, Wissenschaft, or what I'll often be just calling German science instead of using this German term. So when you go to the German context, the term Wissenschaft, there are basically two ways in which you can use this. You can talk about Wissenschaft, or science with a capital S, in an abstract way. And then what you would be talking about is a set of practices and also ideals or values for acquiring rigorous knowledge. Obviously you might say, oh, what makes something rigorous? That depends on intellectual communities who define that. In this time, the 1800s, they had a conception of what rigor meant, but it was also one that they were debating, they were thinking about it. So that's one sense. Some kind of, and you can see that this doesn't have to be only studies of the natural world. This could be, you could be studying anthropology and still say, have some kind of conception of some kind of set of practices and ideals that give you in that field rigorous knowledge, what you would define as rigorous knowledge. So that's Wissenschaft in one sense. The other sense of it is in a more particular kind of definition, where you're really talking about a specific field of study. So in the English usage, actually, there is such a term as, or such a phrase as, he made a science of haircutting. So you're using that term science really to mean, some kind of expertise. So the second German sense of Wissenschaft is a little bit closer to that. And what you're talking about there is the specific practices used to study one defined subject area. So for example, I'll throw another big German compound word at you, Altertumswissenschaft. Anyone know what that means? Altertumswissenschaft. Yeah, some of you are nodding your heads. No? Okay, so Altertum means antiquity. Altertumswissenschaft Wissenschaft is the study, or is the science of classical antiquity. So what we're talking here about is basically what we call classics, right? But in German, that's a science. So when you're talking about science in that sense, Wissenschaft in that sense, you're talking about, in a specific scholarly subfield, you have all these methods, all these standards that you use to evaluate evidence. And so science, so Wissenschaft can also refer to that kind of particular instance, a particular branch of learning where you talk about it as being involved in producing rigorous knowledge. In Germany, science as a concept experienced a boom in the early 1800s when it acquired new importance and prestige. The rise of science was closely connected to the founding of new universities in the German lands at this time. And these universities were the forerunners of the modern research university, in which faculty members were tasked with conducting advanced research and also teaching undergraduates and graduate students. Basically the model of institutions such as the University of Wisconsin today. Research universities became the major sites for scientific inquiry over the next century and remain so. They really accelerated the process of what we would call scientific specialization and professionalization. Specialization, I mean that there are all these different branches of science, of study, different fields that people are going in, and they're hyper-specializing. They're focusing on what may seem like really small areas. My field, modern European Jewish history. To me, actually, that's huge. It's like, whoa, who can actually study all of modern European Jewish history in one lifetime? There's so much already to do, because we live in this age of specialization where scholars are producing so much material, so many discoveries, that you really always have to pick a small kind of corner of the field that you specialize in, that you work on, and that you can truly master. So that's one thing that's going on through the universities. And the other one, so that's specialization. The other one is professionalization. So what that means is, and to you that might seem obvious today, but it wasn't at the time when it was first happening, is that if you want to be a scientist or a scholar, a real scholar, not just a dilettante, like a person who does this as a hobby, you have to be at a university. You're going to be a professor, a teacher at a university, which is paying you to teach students and also expecting you to do research, to do advanced research. And that research will then inform your teaching also. So, and in order to be able to do that, you need to get a PhD. So you need to become a professional, a licensed kind of professional who's approved by a community of peers. So these two things are taking place in Germany really in the 1800s and are accelerating then.
That's the first clip.
That's the first
Talking
clip.
about pretty much the licensing guilds.
Right, the licensing
through the universities and the PhD.
And the gate-kept nature of
the sciences.
The sciences. So this shows that there's been there's been an agenda to essentially hijack the so-called prestigious label of science and its seemingly innocent pursuit of truth, or its transparent pursuit of truth, into compartmentalized, easily manipulated factions of protected credentialist understanding of things. And you see this in the New Testament scholarship as well. Like you can't question the underlying so-called truth that the document is derived upon. And
Adam, I just responding to some feedback in the live chat that maybe we're sidetracking the conversation. We thought that not that we wanted to make it strictly about the shape of the Earth. I'm not asking you to disbelieve your eyes. I'm actually asking you to maybe think differently about what you see and consider that we do have to believe a lot of what the astrophysicists say passed down from on high in a similar way as we're supposed to believe the rabbis or the priests or whatever. But yeah, comments on that clip and what Xavier said there.
It reminds me of the academic gatekeepers in theology.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
There's a guy I follow on Twitter. His name is Joel Baden, and I've seen him on these YouTube atheist shows, and he's the professor of like Hebrew studies, PhD in the Torah, and it says on his bio on his Twitter, like teaching the Torah and defending the Jewish people. And I'm thinking, can you be an honest interpreter of the Bible and theology at Yale when your agenda is to defend the Jewish people? And I think not.
A bit of a rhetorical question.
You're going to get a watered down version, and the academic gatekeepers, many of them are holding up the historical Jesus lie. Even they even gatekeep that issue with guys like Bart Ehrman, in my opinion, and others. And they lie. History is written by the victors and the propagandists, and definitely science, like we see with COVID, science can be bought and controlled and gatekept.
One of the best things you've ever said, Adam. You said recently.
On certain things, I think we can agree that like that some things really are the way they say they are. Not everything is a lie.
Well, I'm not saying that everything is a lie, but really more that there are mass misconceptions that are bandied about as indisputable or irrefutable declarations of truth or fact. And I think there is an important distinction to be made there, that people can labor under mass misconceptions, thinking that they are doing the very best and most honest thing that they can possibly do to believe in the truth. And that's a little bit different than a malicious or sort of a intentional lie. So maybe it's a type of lie because there's deceit built into the belief structure that it's true, but it's not a lie in the sense that people don't fully know the implication of what they're believing or the foundations of their convictions. So I think that there's there's three different categories of belief. Basically, there's unreasonable belief, right? That frogs cause warts or something that can be disproven. There's blind belief, where maybe you're believing in the right thing, but you don't know why you really believe it. You've just sort of been told about it. And then there's dogmatic or doctrinal belief, which is you have a pre-existing framework that instructs your ability to parse data, and you never ultimately question the dogma or the doctrine itself. It's just being used as a lens through which phenomena is viewed. So applying that to the sciences, there was a long-standing belief for hundreds of years that there was a special compound called phlogiston that allowed things to burn, that all objects had phlogiston built into it. And it was later discovered that no, it's actually oxygen. It's gas that's being released out of specific objects that are flammable. There isn't a underlying universal substrate within all things called phlogiston. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that there are standards and things that epistemological ruptures that happen within the sciences that basically lay bare many of the false beliefs or mass misconceptions that were had prior to the epistemological break or the better explanation. So I think that there's a lot of better explanations out there than the sort of chaotic, inchoate, atomistic schizophrenia models that we're led to believe in the sciences today.
So anyways, we were unfortunately not able to secure some of the key guests that we thought about maybe having Adam back on to talk to expand on some of the conversations that we had started with him. And then
totally, which really was an introductory foray into a lot of amazing topics and just objects of interest, literally.
Yeah, and we had installed Adam on the Zetetic.news home site as a permanent fixture, what I will call from now on a Zetetic content creator. Is Zetetic a video content creator, someone who is exploring information without sort of a dismissive, out of hand disregard for certain viewpoints because it contradicts the norm, and asking the viewers not to just believe what they're saying but to proceed by inquiry.
Right.
And so we put Adam here right on the live section because he does live streams principally, but there's also a lot of static content available as well. And we just wanted to engage in open dialogue and continue that conversation. But the first topic I really wanted to talk about, since you and I haven't really even...
It's been a couple months.
Been in person together since that time, and there've been a lot of Twitter conversations and this and that have taken place that I thought maybe this show would be good for us to address.
Totally.
So, I think, initially Adam was pretty silent. We heard from Apollonian Germ.
Yes.
I think more immediately there was a big influx of people on our Telegram who joined and was like, we heard your interview with Adam Green. We wanted to, we enjoyed that and wanted to see what you guys are all about. And I think the folks who had sort of subscribed, or they've been happy with the level of discourse that we have presented, and some suggested that maybe we have Apollonian Germ on because he is very like-minded in our approach.
Yes, fires on many similar cylinders, very much intellectually engaged with questions of philosophy, science, history, mythology, tradition, you name it. He's also got a pretty unique niche as well.
But then we were forwarded a post made on the Apollonian Germ Telegram, which excerpted part of the discussion with Adam Green, pointing out that, well, this is just gobbledygook, stuttering, basically malarkey that is obfuscating, distracting, or just not seeing the forest through the trees, focused on this shape of the earth issue and not really presenting any valid arguments. And we reached out to Apollonian Germ. He expressed an interest on coming on the show, but subsequently did not really follow up with, we wanted to get in direct touch and schedule it so we could do this and have like a dialogue. And by the way, you're welcome to call in.
That's true. It is
a call-in show today. So the number is 1-855-877-5112. So if you are listening, Adam Green or Apollonian Germ, you want to call in and defend, address anything that was said, either on Twitter directly or indirectly as a result of, last, episode 37 that we did, let's do that. Let's have that discussion. If not, we're just going to sort of address what has been said.
Right. And some of the maybe preloaded frames that are being sort of imposed on the kind of epistemological skepticism that we were really offering and pointing to in the last episode. And I think it's also important to continually address the terminology and the language and the labeling around this sort of discourse and this kind of dialectic. Is people have this sort of Pavlovian programming around earthness as being this terraqueous orb idol, essentially.
Yeah.
And all of the theoreticist musings therein. So as soon as the term flat is attached to that particular label, it's sort of a dog whistle for the ignorant a little bit. It's there to shut down conversation and to sort of pigeonhole the interlocution in a derogatory manner, in a sort of lowbrow, sort of low intellectual capital sort of manner. When if you look at the historical efficacy behind many of these criticisms that refer to our epistemological skepticism, you'll see that it's not quite that simple, and that the term FE, flat Earth, is really there to act as a kind of dismissive label, in much the same way that anti-Semitism or conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, those kind of labels serve the same function. Because when you actually listen to the serious research behind globe skepticism, they're not really proposing a model. Of course, there's topography. Of course, there's height and depth. Of course, it's not 100% disk flat. That's a straw man argument. If you really want to steel man the position, you have to look at the criticisms of the existing model in the first place. And if you don't honestly engage those criticisms, then you're coming at it from a straw man point of view.
Yeah. I want to stop you, Xavier, because we have had some sort of technical glitch and our stream has stopped.
Ugh.
Right as you were launching off.
I can
Now I am
recap it.
recording this hard on the disc, but I need to restart my casting software and basically.
It's okay. We can just sort of we've had these various blips, and we can always revisit once everything is back online.
We're back.
Live.
And we're back. Sorry for the intermission. Not exactly sure yet where we got dropped off, but clearly we were hitting on something pretty key.
Yeah, I mean, it was, everything was going fine on all cylinders, and then bloop.
Oops.
We've had these various
Yeah. Anyways,
hiccups before.
jumping back into it, I guess I was trying to highlight the fact that we are an open conversation, zetetically oriented organization. We support Adam Green, No More News, by installing him on our website.
Right.
Apollyon Germ, I haven't installed you yet, but thank you for the recommendation for, what's his name?
The Foundering.
The Foundering, and other things that you've highlighted on your site. We'd love to have you on the show and talk about episode 37 of the Zetetic News cast, where, you know, it was alleged that it was gobbledygook.
There was no substance
behind what was being articulated by my friend here, Xavier Diamant, in that discussion with Adam Green. And subsequent to, you know, the discussions, and, you know, Xavier, forgive me, I gotta reopen our so you can see this.
Here it is.
The multi-view, so you can see what we're streaming here, Xavier, and comment on it. We did not get much response from Adam after the episode that we did with him, which we very much enjoyed.
Really agreed on 90%.
90% of what we talked about, he loved it. He thought I think
had multiple areas
to quote
of agreement.
him, he said, "You guys nailed it."
Right.
You
multiple
guys
times.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay. But then, you know, we started to see the response from the Apollyon Germ community, and actually, the content creators are in some ways differing from their audiences, because in the Apollonian Germ Telegram thread, most of the commenters were supporting globe skepticism. In most of the comments on this Adam Green Twitter post, I would say, are supporting Adam, maybe delving a little bit deeper into the subject. And if you're just listening to the Zetetic Newscast, you should check out the video component of this. Hopefully we're streaming on all the platforms we're trying to, Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube. But anyways, we're showing, you know, the Twitter thread that Adam created post episode 37, post the episode he did with Owen Benjamin, who's a sort of globe skeptic convert, if I could say.
Right.
But didn't bring that up.
Very
minimally.
Superficially, yeah, very minimally.
And but Adam felt like, you know, the need to post this tweet: "Flat Earth is a judeo disinfo deception."
Well,
highlighting again, some people promote this conception of the earth as a form of like arguing their case for a different cosmology, using their own, biblical presuppositions as it's not the only evidence they're presenting.
Oh, and not even close to the best.
It's more of a, what would you say? You say
It's sort of a hermeneutical argument. I mean, ultimately, it's not ontological. Okay, they're claiming it's ontological based on biblical grounds, but I mean, there's plenty of reason to be skeptical about the origins of the Bible and Yahweh as God, as creator of the universe. All that stuff is easily refutable. However, even No More News has admitted that he doesn't really come from actually an atheistic point of view, because to be logically consistent, you do have to allow for the possibility that there is some sort of intelligent basis for reality, and that maybe our mechanistic, materialistic, non-theistic purviews pertaining to evolution and whatnot in these timelines of billions upon gorillions of years, it's really a question of ontology amidst epistemological rupture, and a paradigm that is shifting away from fealty, authoritarian fealty, to individual zetesis or skepticism.
I think Adam is correct to point out that to present only two options is a distraction and a farce.
Well, and using the terminology of gods and Satan and all this, I mean, this does sort of encapsulate many of the talking points from kind of, I would say, Johnny-come-lately sort of channels that don't really want to delve into the fact that, look, the Bible and religious foundations and beliefs are absolutely tenuous at best. And in much the same way that many of this authoritarian theoreticism in the form of this deep space and globes and atoms and all of this, that there is a mystery school basis for both, and that they're actually very much tied at the hip in a lot of ways, and they've run intimately in parallel and to a great extent have merged ever since Copernicus, who was a Catholic priest. So I think that there's this need to untangle a lot of the preloaded frames around biblical cosmology, because that's not necessarily what's being argued for when we bring up the absence of curvature, the behavior of water, the absence of a container, the gas law, the missing R value pertaining to the radius, and the presupposition of a molten iron core that's never been demonstrated or proven. Density
as an explanation for why things rise versus why things fall.
Right, gravitons and all of this kind of relativistic Einsteinian, which is, if you really examine it, that's the gobbledygook. That's the gobbledygook, not that we need more information to empirically
and on
verify.
That note, I mean, one of the things that I feel like, coming away from that conversation with Adam, he was kind of like feeling good about, as far as, and I saw some comments too, sort of corroborating that maybe we didn't do the best job, presenting the globe skeptic position. But one of the things he really brought up was, well, I see comets, I see meteors, and what's your explanation there? And I thought you put forth a really good one, which is, okay, if we're a spinning globe, as they say we are, why don't you ever see comets or meteors coming, in these different angles? It's almost like we're looking at a two-dimensional image, and these light figures are traversing them horizontally or vertically, almost like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see them coming upward or,
terminating at the apex of our view.
Yeah. And he just sort of disregarded that or couldn't like process that in the moment, which I get, it's a difficult thing to like sort of reconcile, which was another part of your point. Because you are inculcated from a very early age to believe in this sort of conception. And so you almost mold what happens within that conception to the presupposition.
Right. And that your perception is preformed with a frame of reference that dubs said phenomenal, a flash shooting light in the sky. Oh, it must be a piece of space debris. There's a hasty conclusion based on inculcation that's being had there. So you're not necessarily proving this thing. You're just essentially regurgitating what you've been told about this phenomena. There's no way to individually forensically verify it. You have to rely on people who have a conflict of interest around disclosing the nature of reality to you.
Right.
So,
and to sort of maybe if Adam's listening, highlight to him that it's not as clear cut as, oh, well, I saw this and so it is that. There's a lot of videos like this one, which I saw on Instagram. Granted, it's part of Flat Earth Fight Club. So, you could say the same thing about it as you could say about NASA, which is that this is faked to present a certain viewpoint.
I mean, my broader point is,
but the point here is this shooting star stops. It literally, if you watch the video, you see it, and I've seen shooting stars as well. This one stops, and there are, like I said, other videos showing all sorts of weird phenomenon as far as shooting stars go. And so to say I saw something and it is that, it's as good as this video evidence, really, which is open to a lot of interpretation and isn't so as the astrophysical community would have you believe.
Well, right, because again, there's a need to reify the model that's already being incentivized. So, in other words, there's a fallacy of misplaced concreteness going on when we simply look at something, and just because we have a preformed idea about it, the very thing we're looking at has to automatically conform to that preformed idea. We actually don't know. There's no way to actually verify it.
Right.
Forensically, empirically, verifiably, what have you. When it comes to actual epistemological rigor, this projection of space and what essentially appears like a fixed, very gradually rotating sky. Oh, that's all that stuff is moving at gorillions of miles an hour, and we're so insignificant, and our ability to sense motion is so defective that we just have to believe that we're just one of those specks moving about at basically absurdist, masonically informed speeds.
On that note, can we talk about some of the discourse that took place on Adam's thread about Eratosthenes?
Oh yeah, the mythical measurer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought this was probably the most fruitful thing about episode 37 is that Adam felt the need to post this, and then there was all this discussion going back and forth, people posting Don Petit
Absolutely.
You know, the NASA astronaut talking about how, we destroyed all that technology. We can't get it back again because it's very difficult, you know.
Which is like classic Duper's delight explanation.
I know. And people saying, hey, have Eric Dubé on your show, you know.
Well, we would love to have Eric Dubé.
We would
on
love
our
to have
show.
Eric Dubé. I think we're a little more deserving of it.
Yeah. And this is, I feel like this conversation with this content creator, No More News, has been very much long in the making. A lot of people have wanted there to be further exploration by him into this topic of discourse and discussion and really ongoing research.
Yeah. Well, I triggered this guy, Levi Richard, because you had pointed out that, well, he posted it, I think, that, you know, the whole legend of Eratosthenes experiment, which is like largely myth, and he dismissed it, you know, but it is true that, like, there isn't a single writing in his name.
No.
It's all hearsay from other geographers or people in antiquity.
Or just retroactively constructed mythos to support the Pythagorean Samothracian concept of a ball world.
Right.
I mean, Pythagoras is created, or he's credited with the original idea of spherical geocentrism. And he was a Samothracian initiate. He's a mystery school initiate. So it's not like what I'm saying is not based on genuine scholarly research into that particular figure. I mean, it is. So, yes, the globe, the idea of a terraqueous orb world suspended in a vacuous chasm, moving quickly, going nowhere, is a gradually informed mystery school invention.
And this is kind of my central beef with Adam coming out of episode 37, is that he characterized the whole subject as basically a distraction. And if there's anything that Zetetic.news is kind of like about, it's highlighting the fact that that is not any more of a distraction than what he's focused on, you know. And I don't disagree. The idea that, like, we have this cult,
this apocalyptic
eschatology that involves us giving our technology, you know, our blood, sweat, and tears literally to this Gog versus Magog end time scenario, is a huge subject worthy of discourse and discussion.
100%.
But that is not to say that globe skepticism, to put it broadly,
is just Bible cosmology.
Yeah, it's
not
Judeo.
just
what did he say? Judeo disinfo deception.
And I will credit some of this classification as being, you know, at least half true.
Some of it is
at least half true, because there are a lot of content creators that just, you know, lie heavy on this sort of Bible grift a little bit as their sole basis for denying the globe its model status over reality. However, we already mentioned in 37 that we think that that's kind of unfortunate, because it evinces a lot of the much deeper scientific and forensic research that does demonstrably show the current globe model to be utterly false. So the idea that just because some content creators sort of peddle this particular biblical cosmology as the basis behind FE does not mean that the entire topic can be pigeonholed within that purview. And I think that all you have to do is really look at Dubé's work. He's not rooted in any kind of Abrahamic belief system. And in nearly all of his refutations of the globe model have absolutely nothing to do with the Bible or Yahweh or any of this other more Johnny-come-lately kind of Rob Skiba stuff, which, you know, there's some, you know, merit within the research to be like, well, you know, maybe they did have a an inkling that the world was more planar back then, but that's not a proof that it's not a ball. So I understand the burden of trying to demonstrate that it's not a ball by using that kind of dubious evidence. And it is true that a lot of flat Earth channels, they are proud of that term, and they wear it big and bold and boisterously, and they use it as a basis to support their pre-existing belief in a higher intelligent designer who they dub to be Yahweh, etc., etc. But historically, really, Yahweh is a nationalistic God that only after Christianity became to be called the God of the universe. But being consistent, it is still the case that while there may be a superordinate being, that doesn't mean that entire topic of conversation can be reduced to mere biblical reductionism or something. I think that's in itself sort of a misdirection within the topic. So I think it just goes to
this tweet is a Adam Green disinfo deception.
Well,
in a way,
in the sense that he's clearly only seen it through this lens, and that's why he's
right into his work. And I kind of get why this was put out.
Sure,
from a self-interested point of view.
Sure,
to
get people to look
to speak
into
the demographic audience that is already sort of bought into your line of inquiry.
Well, yeah, the problem is it's an extremely low resolution understanding of the topic to merely reduce it to a matter of scientific ontology versus biblical cosmology. Clearly, scientific ontology is better.
It's as black and white as Coke versus Pepsi.
It's sort of a straw man characterization, basically. Now, and it just goes to show it's really more indicative of where he's coming from on the topic than anything else. It's indicative that he's only really seen it in this particular frame of reference, and he hasn't seen it from the skeptical, empirical, philosophical frames of reference. And so I think
which is unfortunate because you attempted to bring awareness to him in that light.
And I was using many of the same philosophical, logical, rhetorical avenues that he appeals to in his skepticism of Judaism and the Bible and, chosenite religiosity. And I think that if you were to be really logically consistent, you would have to still apply a similar argument to the very worldview or ontology or cosmology that you've been given as well. Mm-hmm. You've inherited as well.
Right.
In the same way that, he says he was brought up in a Christian household, as was I. He only gradually began to really question it. And everyone who questions the globe has been inculcated into the globe scientific worldview in the same manner that people that still believe in it. So, and it truly is belief-based, which I think has been demonstrated. And it's just important to unpack that.
Yeah, it's evidenced in the thread itself, on this Twitter thread. If you find it on Adam Green's Twitter, and you read all the comments, the globe proponents within that thread, it's belief-based.
Yeah.
100%.
It's conviction-based.
And they can't deny that.
They have a conviction, and thus they have a cognitive bias in only interpreting data in conformity with this misplaced concreteness of this ball world. I mean, come on. Do you really think that rain clouds in Australia are falling at perpendicular angles to rain clouds in Canada and in Newfoundland?
Of course.
I mean, that's what you have to defend antipodal orientation of things. if you're going to uphold a discrete ball
I was
world.
reminded by my child today in anticipation of this show, one of the earliest childhood nursery rhymes that is very relevant to this whole discussion. And it begs the question why we stopped wondering these things. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
And
but Neil deGrasse Tyson is going to tell you what it is, and you're going to stop wondering.
Oh, we have that figured out.
I'll have to open Telegram, but there was a good meme that I posted there sort of pointing out that you can't go up, you can't go horizontal, you can't go anywhere. You can't even broadcast your voice through an invisible spectrum of information without the government controlling you. So why would he asks, in my opinion, kind of a naive question about the motives. Why would they lie about that? Well,
pretty compelling.
The same
motives.
reason they would lie about anything else, for their self-interests,
right?
Which are numerous.
It absolutely replete, and it dovetails in with everything that he's talking about. I mean, he even agreed right before we got into it that, if they could convince the whole world of a fictitious savior, then he could easily see some of these more modern occult charlatans getting away with all kinds of scams and hoaxes. He did admit that.
True. So
it's just we're inviting him to really take that lens a little bit farther. It's a huge, very compelling area of inquiry that again is ongoing. It's expansive, and the implications are vast.
They have multiple. Mind Unveiled on YouTube has multiple exposés of the trying to remember what they call it exactly, but it's it's like the reprogrammed, and it's this whole trend in the early 1900s, late 1800s of building orphanages and mental institutions for the societally unfit. And I think their overall gestalt is that this was like a reset program. And basically they reprogrammed a big part of the population. And it makes me wonder, because the oral history of my family doesn't really go back that far. Even though we supposedly, have written history going back at least 5,000 years.
Yeah, makes you question the veracity, efficacy, and reliability of dating really much of anything.
On that note, there was another subject which came up for me between episode 37 and now that I wanted to highlight in this same vein, and that's the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
I sent you several messages about that because I had thought about it before. I just had never really delved into it. And I've even been to one of these big, huge mosque structures in the United Arab Emirates, and they're obscene. They are like
super intricate, nonsensically
proportioned, at great expense, ornate, filled with artifacts, not in the same vein as like Biltmore, where Biltmore was actually used as like a storage facility for so-called antiquities and other like subjects of national security interest during World War II. It was literally a storage facility commissioned by the government. Now it's state-owned, the whole thing, so anyways, the Taj Mahal always struck me as odd because again, we're given this same kind of like touristic-y story about a ruler who loved his wife. And
How quaint.
if you even look into the ruler who loved his wife, you know, he had like thousands of wives. So already your logic is being assaulted, right? By that very fact. And then you look at when it was purported to have been constructed, and the sort of the mainline academic literature around its dating and its construction are all European accounts of it after having been existed for like 30 some years, supposedly.
A big chunk of
And
the
so they're
documents,
literally
too.
traveling to India and encountering the locals and getting stories from them about how it was constructed. And that is what we know in the West as being the history. So, do we believe what the 1700 era European travelers were hearing from the locals in India at that time? Or is there maybe something more to this?
Right.
And you look at the official story, y'all can go on Wikipedia and read about how this guy commissioned, 1,000+ elephants to carry marble that was quarried 350 miles from where it was built. And all sorts of other stuff like this, getting all these jewels and blah, 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 which they may well have had, just in the coffers, not necessarily having to go out and trade for them or whatever. But just the logistics, the manpower, etc., like on its face seems preposterous. Preposterous.
Ludicrous.
Because look at how India, who is becoming more industrialized, how they construct today. Are they even capable of these feats with hydraulic technology? I mean, why aren't we doing this anymore? Oh, it was just, excesses of a oligarchy, blah, blah, blah. It's the same pyramid story of, it's just, they commanded so much power, they had all these slaves, and you just see, it's all the
Artisan,
the manpower,
mastercraft slaves,
and also the beasts of burden. These slaves were also very adept, apparently, at using beasts of burden to lift heavy weights and move them over huge distances. Wow,
animal telepathy, cool.
And so I started to look into this and like some of the counter theories to this. And there's a lot of evidence actually that it was a renovation on top of something that existed much more ancient than before.
Just like huge swaths of the buildings we have today.
And I'll provide the link in the description. I don't have a specific clip here because the whole discussion is like 30 minutes long, but Marvin Mills was a professor who put forth a theory that, Taj Mahal was perhaps an earlier Vedic Indian tomb or palace that was seized essentially by the Islamic invaders of the time, and basically put a facelift on it that was Islamified.
Right.
And my whole, revelation on this is, if the original story was hard to believe, how they constructed it for people of the 1720s, 1730s
in rural India along a riverbank with beasts of burden and no hydraulics. If that was hard to believe, well, how hard is it to believe even more ancient people with ostensibly even more ancient primitive tools. How did they do that?
Mm.
Regardless of whether, there's this whole like political thing going on with India. There's like lawsuits with people who allege that this is like, we need to reclaim our heritage. This is like our, a Vedic symbol. It shouldn't be Islamified. And there's that whole thing. I'm not so interested in that whole thing because
Right.
we don't really know if it was originally a Vedic temple either.
Well, right, because we're operating under this sort of misconceived teleological assumption that our current state is the most advanced, and basically our size is the same throughout time mostly.
Yeah.
And it's just all pure presumption. There's no, I think that it's more likely that, like patterns in nature, there are fractals, and that we are probably a smaller fractal of beings that were similar to us that came before. And there's evidence of it, and it's probably covered up. And the rest of the evidence, they try to paper over because it's hidden in plain sight. And just like the example of the Philadelphia City Hall, apparently it only cost, this is back in the 18th century or early 19th century when it was built, some, $10-12 million. And then in 1960, when they tried to demolish it, they said it was impossible. It would bankrupt the entire city of Philadelphia and put the rest of the state of Pennsylvania in debt.
Yeah.
So how about that? Less than 150 years after it's constructed, they can't demolish it. The costs would exceed any fathomable budget at the time. So
yeah,
same sort of thing applies to these ancient constructions. There's got to be some kind of antiquitech, etheric levitation, frequency capacitor or something that was able to, with the assistance of larger beings who perhaps have more dominion over the ether,
that's kind of like, to me, that's kind of the only answer, because if it were some more brute force type of mechanism, where is the equipment?
Yeah.
Where's the equipment in the archaeological record of all these big machines that were helping them? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Or perhaps they, through their own, some other mechanism within their biology, are able to manipulate. I mean, that's the subject of basically every Marvel superhero legend and basically God legend, is it not? The power over your physical dominion with just a force.
Well, and there are,
but where's the machinery? I mean, if it's something similar to what we're using today, but on a grander scale, where's the machinery?
It's not there.
Oh, is that oil? Is that what we're burning in our cars now? It's all compressed by the globe Earth because of gravity into a goo that we extract and then we refine and burn in our cars to take us to work. Seriously?
Oh. that paradigm is supposed to be the most sophisticated we've ever been. I think it's again, it's a counterfeit reality. It's a papering over how primitive we actually are and how much more advanced and in tune with the simplicity of nature, perhaps, and the forces therein, previous humanities were. And I think that a lot of that has been intentionally kept away, hoarded on the outskirts and beyond. And perhaps it's actually been the basis for breakaway civilizations that may still have a presence here. And they
sure have a lot of space to hide.
Absolutely.
With all these tunnels and stuff that are blocked off, for example.
Yeah, and
both upper and lower.
And we have a yarn about the lights we see in the sky that renders us incurious about various phenomena that could be happening up there.
Yeah.
That allows for
perhaps transport across large distances in very fast capacities.
Well, one thing I was wondering is, like, do you think that Alex Jones, after that incident, is kind of like, I guess, like, do you think that, like, now he's not safely able to keep, like, running his whole show as honestly as he used to be able to? Like, he's kind of been defeated?
I mean, that would be in my opinion, sort of a naive take. I think that whatever happens with Alex Jones, his operation is more or less complete in a lot of ways. What's it? 78% of people think that we have failed leadership and that the economy is going in the wrong direction. I mean, he was saying back in the early 2000s, when he was doing better work, admittedly, I think he got lighter and lighter and more diluted over time. But, you know, back in the early days of the 2000s, he had some pretty insightful hunches as to where the trail of breadcrumbs goes from the two towers and which country it's the bonanza of bread is located. But he was never able to really go with that for obvious reasons.
Not long term.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, he has a rightful credit to launching the Ron Paul revolution. He has his audience a rightful credit to, you know, to helping Trump get into office.
Well, that and also just the health war point of view.
Yeah.
I think that
and he has
awareness,
said in his own broadcast, ideally, I could just retire and go fish and make documentaries, which, you know, maybe, Alex, you should do.
That was really when he was in my, like, 9/11 martial law, rise of the police state.
Yeah, didn't he make documentaries more like in the early 2000s?
Yeah. I
feel like part of one he made about Obama. Yeah.
The Obama deception. Yeah.
I think to your point, though, rather your question, Riley. I mean, anytime you have an organization of 50 plus employees, you are naturally going to start self-censoring, and you know there are obligations. He has obligations that he feels he has to meet, and you know, we actually, this was a good discussion on our Telegram channel about Adam Green being an agent and how one could potentially be bought off. And I asked the question, well, because someone was alleging that Adam was an agent in the Telegram. And my question was, well, how do you think he was actually bought off? And I think the same question is valid for Alex Jones as well. If in fact you do think he is a agent, you know, because you know the Hollywood the Hollywood conception is like some shadowy figure comes into your office and or like, you know, pulls you off the road and makes an offer you can't refuse and like threatens your life and that sort of thing.
Not to say that doesn't happen.
Not to say that doesn't happen, but I think there's a more subtle influence that happens when you actually gain an audience and are become dependent on the audience's donations or whatever, you know, they're buying up products, such that even if you tell yourself, you know, I'm maintaining this sort of, when you start to receive donations or purchases that are substantial, and then you also see those same people making comments or writing you mail and telling you how they think you should be running things, it has an impact.
Definitely.
Because at the end of the day, these people are human beings, and we're all influenced by the other human beings in our life. So
well, I think that, like, I think, like, oftentimes too, like, it doesn't always matter as much. Well, I suppose in the case of InfoWars, Alex Jones has been a very important figure for a long time, but, like, I feel like it is often better to look at it from, a collective point of view, like, for example, like you said, the company, or, for example, like, like what you just said about, you know, influence, like it makes me think of like, you know, how a lot of like the free speech alternative platforms, for example, have all, if you look it up, a lot of them have been reported to like have their different hypocrisies. Like what's it called? Gather was like censoring Nick Fuentes, for example.
Right.
And like, I think like, you know, that's because it can sometimes be inevitable, like to claim that there's ever like a completely free platform or completely free news network isn't true by nature. But like, what was I gonna say? There's actually also like one thing I was curious about. I'm not sure if like I believe this myself, but like I know one thing you've probably heard before is that like people say Alex Jones, they claim to have some evidence mainly based off like the look of his teeth and his weight, that in like 1998 he was replaced by somebody.
Well, that this is actually a one that I'm fairly familiar with, is the Bill Hicks thesis, which is that Bill Hicks.
Oh right, that was who. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And I mean, hey, that's a Zetetic kind of investigation. I mean, if you look at his close friends, many of the networks that Bill Hicks was associated with, steeped in the occult, steeped in you know, deception-based magic, is it beyond the pale to imagine that he got tagged and they were willing to put a lot of money towards him to fulfill a different role than just being sort of a, you know, second-tier left-wing comedian? I mean, I think so. It's certainly possible, especially when you have figures like George Carlin providing a much more sort of compelling cult of personality around his anti-white vitriol that ran through all of his comedy sketches. I mean, he was always blaming, you know, evil, you know, white middle-class Republican bankers. I mean,
You know, you would only ever see like white people in George Carlin's audiences too. Like you never hear of black people saying that they're fans of George Carlin, even though he claimed to be so sympathetic for black people. It's all about white guilt, you know.
This guy Wyatt Stagg is excellent.
That. Stick to your faggoty polkas and waltzes. And that repulsive country line dancing shit that you do. And be yourself. Be proud. Be white. Be lame. And get the fuck off the dance floor. Now.
Except he just outlined, you know, several European traditional dances that occur on dance floors. Be proud, but get the fuck off. What?
No, it's y'all don't have any culture. All you can do is appropriate culture, but your native culture is lame.
Yeah, it's lame. Right, that? It's lame. Yeah.
Yeah, you see that? So you know, this broader entry here from Wyatt Stagg, excellent deconstruction of Carlin's role, and I think that someone like him, they can only have one figure like that. They couldn't have like Bill Hicks kind of copying this kind of shtick. So it's possible that maybe they recycled him with his connections into a more sort of occult thespian, you know, proto-Leninist figure of someone who they could lead around, and he would, you know, drop some breadcrumbs here and there that had truth and had, you know, deeper research efficacy to it, but wouldn't ever really give you a solid direction as to who was really behind the so-called deep state or the bloodlines, or you know what have you. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that the state would exact resources to have a sort of right-wing paranoid conspiratorial figurehead that they could use as a sort of discreditation tactic later on down the line. And I think that's what they're trying to do with this whole lawsuit thing, is to basically tar and feather anyone who's ever supported the kind of research that he's brought to the table as just being a hurtful disinformation lunatic.
Well,
you know?
it's easy to see how courts will now classify speech as violence when the kind of soup du jour ideology, which is being pushed by the mainstream media, classifies silence as violence. So if silence is violence, speech is, I mean, easily in that category.
Well, and what's more than that, it's a double standard because they'll look the other way when there's real hardcore physical violence being exacted against certain
More
parts of the population.
hypocrisy, more hypocrisy writ large.
So I mean, it's do as I say, not as I do, sort of thing.
Yep.
Text literally, whereas the Gnostic text or the Foundations of Christianity translated the text allegorically. The reason they were left out is because of the knowledge they contain, not because the Gnostic texts were from unofficial sources. I have a Bible in my room. I study it from time to time. For me, it's only one of many books I look to for wisdom. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there are many Christians out there reading more than just the Bible, but I simply do not agree with the whole King James only philosophy, or the hundreds of other denominations of Christianity, all focusing on one detail or interpretation and distorting it to their own perspective. This can't be the way. Approximately 33% of the world as we know it is Christian. If Christianity is the answer and a third of our population follow this Jesus Christ, then why do we have such high levels of depression and violence? Why is there a general lack of awareness, willingness, passion, and drive? It's obvious that, quote, turning to Jesus is most of the time a cookie-cutter way for people to bandage up their problems as opposed to learning and growing from them. There's nothing wrong with the idea of Christianity, but there is an issue of what it's become. We have to stop mental laziness. It's time to stop the suppression of magic and this whole idea of the devil and Satanism. It's a complete lack of knowledge of the psyche. That is our real problem. We don't actually understand ourselves. We started running before learning how to walk.
Examine yourself and understand who you are. Whosoever does not know self does not know anything, but whoever knows self has acquired the knowledge of the universe. Jesus, Book of Thomas, from the Gnostic Gospels. Those who know and realize the self are forever free. Kata Upanishad.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could maybe take a little bit more of a critical mythicist position against Christianity and say that it is in some ways toxic in and of itself because it personifies the idea of a suffering servant that is a precursor to a conquering king, and that this conquering king has, the metaphysical capability to genocide anyone that it deems not worthy. So, and that goes back to really Judaism and Yahwism ultimately. So, but it is true that there was a lot of pagan syncretism, and really even today, modern Catholicism is has a lot of pagan roots, and there's a lot of pagan aspects to the symbolism and the ritualism and everything. It's just the underlying theological orientation is, harkens to some of the things that this entry is bringing up, which is there's a lot of esoteric elements and really ultimately mysterious and unknown attributes to a lot of the origins of many of these religions.
At the end of the day, you talk to 10 different Christians, you get 10 different interpretations of the same text,
right,
which were written by the same translators, which was a very exclusive class of people,
highly gatekept.
And prior to that, who knows?
Right.
Who knows? Just like Eratosthenes' legend, It was
legend.
largely hearsay. It was largely, you know, it was largely oral history passed on down, eventually transcribed by somebody who cared enough about the subject matter to put it down, and then, you know, later curated, edited, translated, transliterated by, again, a very mysterious, esoteric, privileged group of people. You know, you also have to keep in mind the history of the writing press and written history
Itself,
if you're
right.
even gonna believe. I mean, you can't simultaneously believe the mainstream narrative around how long we've had, you know, advanced writing skills, for example, and histories of bookmaking. You can't believe that, and also that this was, you know, not a ubiquitous capability of most people, you know, like it was a very privileged thing that was exclusive and not within the reach of most people.
Right.
And so there's
the rub, really.
There's the rub. I mean,
is that knowledge, it doesn't mean that knowledge is the only form of power, but power is essentially involved within knowledge. And that's not a bad thing. It should be embraced. But the reality of that embrace is that some things are just not as they are. Some things are not as they appear within the record, and that there's going to be contamination, source corruption, mystery origins, etc., that are patched together to uphold a certain purview of power.
I just kind of see it like I see politics, you know.
Absolutely.
I see 2+ billion people at divided roughly at 50-50, 51-49%, each reading their own book, believing their own way, not realizing they're both being sort of herded by the same power structure to an apocalyptic end. They are going to get an apocalypse one way or the other if they continue on this trajectory.
Yeah, because it's self-edifying, and it's a way of reifying their beliefs. They have to make real what they claim is the ultimate reality. And so if they're going to claim that revelation is an ultimate reality, then they're going to try and not symbolically but physically implement some of the ideas behind it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, if you're an apocalypticist, right? If you're for an apocalypse that is ultimately a lifting of the veil, ultimately it's like for a better good.
There's a winner and a loser. There are winners and losers.
You have to necessarily keep that veil in place in order for it to later be lifted. So this is why I prefer anacalypsis, which is to ignore the veil from the outset. You don't need the veil to be lifted so there's a better, greater good later on, or a new world that can be built of a pure nature, when you're actively trying to obfuscate and distort that nature in the present to bring about the lifting of said veil.
Right.
Right. And so if you follow my analogy linguistically, you'll see that the end times is an apocalyptic fantasy, essentially, because it's based on keeping people blinded in order to present them something new later on. And anacalypsis seeks to basically cut through all that and disclose the deception that is the veil to be lifted in said apocalypse. And so I would say that you hear a lot of this stuff of, we're in the time of calamity, we're in the Kali Yuga, we're in the, everything there's a 400-year cycle of megadeath, and there's all these that kind of messaging going on. But ultimately, that is still apocalyptic, even though it may have some portentous accuracy in events that will come about. It's better, in my view, to just slice through as much as possible the deception that, everything's getting ready to collapse and everything's horrible, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So all apocalypse, all revelation is built on a self-fulfilling desire to reify that which you see as a divine prophecy. So ultimately, apocalyptic religious systems are inherently dangerous because they seek to maintain a sense of blindness in order to bring about calamity that then, because of the calamity, provides us resolution or reconciliation with our true destiny at the end, so that there can be a new beginning.
They hate on Alex Jones for selling storable food for the. You might say we already have an inflation apocalypse, which would make that a good idea. But they hate on him for selling that with the information that inflation could be coming, as if he is to exaggerate, this apocalypse that's coming. But, really NASA's as guilty as he is for forecasting, asteroid hits and things of this nature, which
solar flares
would never be categorized in that same eschatological sort of category as what the rapturous and the apocalypticists in the various religious traditions hold in their mind as being sort of like the future trajectory. But NASA is very much
I would say an apocalyptic viewpoint too. Absolutely.
And they're creating an apocalyptic belief system as well.
Absolutely.
As are the United Nations climate hystericists. They are they have a vested interest in inculcating that fear-based mind control programming, whether it's a religion to them or not. It doesn't matter. It's belief based. And they depend on that continued belief to advance their their ideology and profit from it.
Oh, totally. I mean, if you can get people to believe that we're just so lucky that every day we don't wake up and get hit by a planet destroying extinction level event like what would happen with the dinosaurs. I mean,
don't make me play Aerosmith now.
I mean, if they can get people to believe that, then of course people are gonna be like, "Oh yes, please send my tax dollars to NASA so they can defend me from the evil space rocks, so they can defend me from the potentially evil aliens 20 guillion miles away."
Yeah, they recently successfully diverted an asteroid, I thought, or they moved the trajectory, which was a proof of concept, and you should thank them for that.
Well, and all you got to do is watch the movie Greenland to see what they would love to fantasize in what to do to the population, and combine that with many of the holographic drone imaging technologies that were displayed in a fantastical manner in the one of the Spider-Man movies, one of the recent Spider-Man movies. Combine that together with World War III type conditions, and how easy would it be to convince the population that various powerful incendiary bombs were actually asteroids getting ready to strike.
Easy.
Oh wait, that actually accords to the whole Ronald Reagan.
It's just a military operation.
Yeah.
You do it regionally.
Yeah.
And broadcast it on TV.
Yeah.
It's easy.
So again, if you buy the poisoned well premise, you're going to swallow the poisoned well solution. So, and that's true within religion, but it's also true within the sciences. And if you don't think that there's a philosophical telos behind these various non-theistic materialist worldviews, you would be wrong.
Well, we're pretty close to the end of the show here. I had hoped to cover some other subjects, like macroeconomically.
Absolutely, we should do a rundown of the semiconductor.
I mean, there's several things here. Just massive shifts happening that I think. Man, it's
seismic.
Even my own sort of cognitive dissonance is like preventing me from really appreciating how massive this is going to be. It's, to me, some of these things are bigger impacts than, say, COVID.
Potentially,
in a sense, because it's not. With COVID, there was sort of like the inflation factor of companies paying you to stay at home. They were sending the stimmy checks, and that sort of thing. And then the chickens started to come home to roost with unemployment, losing the jobs not being, returned, and then the inflation from the stimmy checks and the endless money printing and so on and so forth. But there was sort of like a delayed reaction. And I feel like, man, Biden's administration did a very Trump-esque thing in that they basically said, Chinese Americans American citizens working in China for the semiconductor industry either have to choose their citizenship or their job. And that's something Trump would have done, and they'd be like, oh, he's protectionist, nationalist, blah blah blah. But Biden does it, and people are like, oh, well, this is in our best interest. It's national security. And maybe it actually is. I mean, we came up with a lot of this technology.
Sure.
And we gave it to the Chinese in the first place. Sure. So what are the motives of bringing it back,
Well, I mean, this is, it's an interesting maneuver, but it shows the trajectory of the past two world wars, which typically started out with some kind of trade dispute and then escalated to a currency dispute, and then it became a industrial dispute, and then it became a military conflict. So this is at the industrial level, and huge industrial ruptures.
I mean, we already have a huge like Ford, for example. They can't ship their cars, so they're shipping them, and they can't be driven because they're pending a chip installation because of chips that they couldn't get. I mean, the semiconductor industry drives the nation at this point.
To a great extent, absolutely.
We are dependent on China. Why? I don't know. Because Intel, which is all the CPUs basically in Windows and Mac computers in the world, is an American company. NVIDIA, which does all the graphic processing units, is an American company. AMD, the biggest competitor to NVIDIA, is an American company. But we have to, we gave it to China, and then now we're going to just flip this switch, which some analysts are saying, is going to basically halt the supply chain for everything from washer, dryers, iPhones, cars, TVs, computers, which, I mean, computers drive your cars, computers drive so it could be enormously impactful. In the meantime, being an American, would I want Americans to be building these things which we ostensibly invented? Yeah, I guess so. I
mean,
is this going to result in that? Are these
I
people
don't know.
or are they gonna defect and stay in China and be like, screw you, Biden, you fucking idiot, you're gonna make me move home?
Well, there's that, but
Or
also
move to America even if it's not my home?
this also plays into the broader theme of sabotage. Though,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little
which we
bit,
talked
because, I mean, this guy is
He's
This
who
mafia
is he
puppet-
anyways?
he-
I mean,
this
rubber
mafia-
mask Biden,
rubber mask. I mean, this whatever
hologram Joe,
mafia puppet.
totally,
right?
100%.
Total mafia
China
puppet.
back pocket. So it makes me wonder. Oh, if this is so hurtful to China when we know he's in his back pocket, is it very hurtful?
Okay,
to China?
here's what I think. All right, who's the largest owner of U.S. debt? Oh wait, China. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna bring all the companies back here.
It's just a stunt.
Why don't you China buy the property here in the United States now that the companies are here? Oh, yeah, go Chinese investors. You guys just buy up what, another 200 million acres worth of industrial land in the United States? Yeah, do it. Do agriculture, do industry. China will
Those
own
are the
the
type
United
of deals
States.
to be done. Another Biden administration development since
asset regulation.
since we last had our episode, the releases digital asset regulation framework, and what this really is just pontificating on, agency here, agency there, go do a study and develop a report to me, and then we'll decide what we're gonna do, the crypto fate, and give me all your data. It'll basically agency directive to generate a bunch of bureaucratic paperwork for them to then decide what they're going to do, which we already kind of know what they want to do. They've already said they want to do the CDBC, the central bank digital currency.
They want a massive regulatory mega web that's under this ridiculous auspice of same risk, same regulation. Oh, well, if your money's at risk like they are in the regular financial markets and they're at risk in crypto, then we have carte blanche capability to regulate crypto.
Yeah, it's basically roping in this nascent invention, whether it came out of military intelligence or the Federal Reserve Board to begin with,
or the early programmer genius of the dark web that was ripped off by another computer genius who was at the head of the Federal Reserve.
Whether it was or not is sort of immaterial to the fact that they want to co-opt it.
Of course.
And it is not just Bitcoin.
No.
It's the whole digital asset regulation. So you have to focus on the language, and this gets into Internal Revenue Code, statutory language, and language period. What do words mean when they're being spoken to you, when they're written on a notice? Digital asset, okay, regulation framework, okay. Think of what a digital asset is. It could be a picture. It could be a piece of art. It could be a
PGP key.
A PGP key. It could be a movie file. It could be an audio file. It could be a cryptocurrency. Take T-Fuel, for example. T-Fuel you might describe as a cryptocurrency. You might describe as a software access token to a decentralized video streaming infrastructure.
Right.
Digital asset regulation framework. So, yeah, like you said, perfect. Mega web tentacles to basically sucker in anybody who is spellbound by their linguistics.
Right.
And unfortunately, I'm very concerned that the blue chip crypto companies who have adopted this nascent technology and created a blue chip company around it will be suckered by the digital asset regulation framework, because the way any corporate lawyer attorney operates in America today is to just do what the U.S. government tells them to do, or what they think the U.S. government is telling them to do. And once they create enough ambiguity around the language of a digital asset, I think they might be able to properly co-opt the entire crypto space to a large extent. Of course, you're always going to have underground economies. You'll have, success stories and failure stories underneath the radar, beyond the radar's purview. But by and large, the retail public is going to be swept up in this. I mean, I had a conversation with a relative whose CPA is telling them, asking for their crypto transactions and trying to understand how much it was worth in US dollars at the time you bought and sold it, so they can do some sort of calculation so that we can determine how much you owed for selling this amount when you bought it this amount. And I'm just like, it's going to be pretty easy for them. I mean, I'm just in a bad mood, but the level of compliance does concern me, because as soon as they digitize and they modernize, that's when we really have to be concerned. Right now, a lot of the bureaucracy is still very antiquated, in the same way the Soviet Union is, antiquated in their technology, and they are in some ways limited by that. But that's always the threat, is that they're upgrading their technologies and their capabilities to track and trace, and
absolutely,
that's what this is all about.
It is. And I mean, I think that they want a surveillance finance system in the same way they've wanted a panopticon over self-surveillance. They want it over finance. They don't like, they especially don't like the idea of barter economies. They don't like agorist-based free market currency creation dynamics, because then that lets the cat out of the bag. Oh, that's right. We've been able to create our own money all along.
Yeah.
And it's actually these monopolist hucksters who are at the heads of all these mega banks. They are the ones who actually should be outlawed and regulated.
The biggest mind blower for me are people who are like, oh, I have to report my staking earnings for crypto as income, even if I don't sell it into dollars. And I'm just like, and I'm having different arguments with folks, and they're like, okay, so you grow corn. That corn has a dollar value. That's income. And I'm like, but if I didn't sell the corn, if I eat the corn, do I have to pay an income tax on the corn that I ate?
Yeah, or the eggs that your chicken lays.
Or that so if not, why is it different if I trade it for something else?
Right.
It just
it's because the whole fiat system is a proto surveillance system to begin with.
Right.
They don't have their full machination, but they are able to control transactions through the medium. So it's enough of a conditioning apparatus to get the populace used to only thinking in dollar terms. So in a way, the money system is a precursor to the digitalized surveillance finance system that they've always wanted since the beginning of the 20th century. But they couldn't get there mechanistically or in an engineered way.
Because of the diversity of currency itself.
At the time, but because they've diluted people's understanding of money for so many generations, they've got people thinking that money can only exist from the central bank money tree.
Right.
And that's the only way that it can exist. And people need to be vastly re-educated about that.
Yeah, and I wonder, I see these perturbations like Russia allowing international trade in Bitcoin, the whole BRICS alliance coming in some ways at odds with like the SWIFT system. Is that good? Is it bad? I'm not sure. Because in some ways I see that development as playing into the hands of a future proposed world digital currency or some sort of mechanism to, standardize currencies under a world digital currency. In other ways, I have to, well, no, I don't know. Do these countries have their own self-interest that they can legitimately wield against the world powers? I come back to like the Antarctica agreement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can disagree on a lot, but one thing we can't disagree on is X. X, of course, Antarctica, and that crazy military agreement not to allow anybody to explore. But like, what else are they agreeing on?
Exactly. It's
beyond our purview, and are these these little skirmishes that they have on the world stage? Are they just conditioning us for the next thing that they want to roll out?
Absolutely, and I think that is a big part of it. That's how they control the plantation, and people need to think that they are so insignificant without worldly allowance, worldly powers affording them an existence, and I think all of the world cosmology and modern philosophical presumptions and scientific attitudes, they all crystallize around this idea that no man is an island. We're all connected. We all depend on each other. We have expert people that tell us how much they depend on us.
It's like that book, The Giver.
Yeah.
It feels very much like that.
Definitely. And that kind of dystopia combined with a technotronic surveillance finance, mega toxic waste prison system,
air prison,
is essentially what they have, and they have to maintain it, and the way they maintain it is by tinkering the knobs on everyday people's ability to function according to how they've been conditioned to live, or what they've gotten used to over time, and what have you. So really the domestication element within the prison system, the open air prison system, is essential to understanding how best to short circuit the system itself. So if you can kind of de-domesticate or unschool or be your own bank or become more autonomous within various local communities and economies, you're going to embark upon the real resistance against this Leviathan system. And you just have to keep in mind that it's multivalent. It works and is active on multiple levels of control, and there's not really one that's necessarily more important than another, because it's all part and parcel to the actual control grid. So understanding all the facets in the deceptions within that control grid are essential to creating a mindset and a worldview and a way of life that is increasingly resistant against it. So and that has been on the rise, and I think that was maybe an unwitting feature, even if you are to suppose that folks like Alex Jones are completely controlled opposition. There really is no such thing maybe as completely controlled opposition, because there's always going to be some sort of off-script moment. There's always going to be some kind of personal entanglement that, data gets released in some way, and it starts to spread like wildfire here, there, and the other place, and all of these things in the information age kind of connect together in a puzzle ultimately. And getting a corner here and a corner there, it's all part of the process. And you have to kind of go one piece at a time to a great extent. But the trade war, industrial war, currency war, and on the ground war, I really wonder, like, is it very much a numerological script? Is everything lined up according to certain Masonic geometric date functions within the made-up calendar? I really think that there's something to that, because they're the ones who think that they have full control over magic.
It's almost like Black Mirror type, Westworld type.
It is.
Yeah.
All that stuff is hidden in plain view. Revelation of the method, externalization of the hierarchy. They do it for karmic purposes. Because it absolves them of their Mephistophelian guilt. They hate the fact that it's so easy to manipulate the hordes, that they disclose these things on purpose in obfuscated ways.
Increasingly obvious ones.
But increasingly obvious ones.
It's now a state of... it's not a state of trickery. It's almost a state of humiliation.
Yes. Yeah, that actually... that's part of the demoralization process. Leading... it's whatever the ladder of genocide or whatever, and actually... Right. If you're to look at the UN's definition,
I still want to do a screening. We need to do when we can get our avatars from G World.
Oh yeah.
We can do Mystery Science Theater, and we can screen the documentary Act of Killing.
Yes.
Which, to your point about the ladder of genocide and where we might be on it, that's a good movie that to sort of illustrate that.
Yeah.
But, we're a bit past our time, partially because we had so many technical issues. I'm going to have to go back and review. I'm not sure what made it on YouTube at this point. We had multiple on and off.
Sabotage as usual.
Sabotage, but we appreciate anybody hanging on, listening to this. Head over to Zetetic.news and check out our articles, news section, live section, contributor section. If you're interested in supporting us, don't forget as well to like and subscribe, and hope y'all have a good rest of the week.